All right, guys, it's about 6:05. Um, Wanted to give everybody about 5 minutes to get in. I'm going to go ahead and get this thing started. But if you've got any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to throw them into the Q&A portion of your screen. And then if I see that they pop up, I'll address them as they come in. Or we can wait till the very end and answer your questions at the end. Doesn't matter to me. So thanks for having us. Really appreciate Fire Nuggets reaching out to me. It was an honor to be on this panel with all of the other greats that are presenting over the virtual engine webinars. But I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about the stretch. We've got about 2 hours worth of material, and I'm here to answer any questions afterwards that you guys may have. So feel free, like I said, throw them in the Q&A or hold them to the end. It doesn't matter to me. So starting out this picture right here, this picture is real near and dear to my heart. This is one of my rookies that I had. He's about 4.5 months off of his probation period, and man, he nailed this stretch. So if you can see right here, he's got a building right next to the rig, shouldered 150, shot the gap. I was just so proud of him here. This is one of those shining moments that you have for your probies. It's like, man, this guy's really listening, man. So shot that gap and nailed the stretch. It was a fantastic one, man. So we'll get started with some terms. I've been told that I've used some terminology that may be unfamiliar to people, pretty familiar to me, but I always wanted to get everybody on the same page so we're all speaking the same language. So the first one there is called the drop. When I refer to the drop, I'm referring to the desired location for setting up the attack line. So depending on your building construction, your district that you work in, this could be a stairwell, it could be the front door A side, could be the side door of a commercial building, could be anything that you set up for. But essentially, you're going to be stretching dry to the drop. So I've got some defaults on drop locations, depending on if we're in residential or commercial, and we'll go through some of that. But you always have to keep in mind that you may not be able to stretch to the same place in the same types of buildings all the time. So that leads us to the second term here. It's referred to as the audible. So an audible, just like sports terminology, is going to be a diversion from the original drop plan. So like I said, I've got defaults that I use on residential and commercial, but if I see something I don't like, or if I get orders over the radio that conflict with our original orders, we're going to audible and we're going to stretch to a different position on the building. And you've got to set your people up for success on this audible. The first time they audible from the original drop plan can't be the day that they're stretching on the fire. So I've got some a video in here that I went through with my guys on how to kind of prep them for the audible. You just got to kind of spring it on them, man. And where they fail in training, they're going to pick that up and succeed on the fire ground. So setback is the distance from the rig to the drop and everything in between. So depending on where you work, you may have short setbacks, may have long setbacks. These setbacks may include obstacles as well, but all that has to be considered in your stretch plan. So you've got to stop thinking about your hose as having one length on the pre-connect or on your dead bed on the back, which leads us to our next terms. First term here is referred to as travel hose. The travel hose that I have is the amount of hose that's needed from the rig to the drop. So we're going to take into account the setback, any obstacles that we have in the way, and everything that I need to get from rig to drop is what's considered to be my travel hose. On the end of that travel hose is going to be my working hose. So that working hose is the amount of hose needed to reach the seat of the fire. So that may be 50 foot, could be 100, could be 175, just depends on how big the building is, what the compartmentalization of the building is, and where the seat of the fire is located compared to where you are when you make the drop. So my buddy Dennis Laguerre, he has a saying that he says is that if you can't mic drop the nozzle on the seat of the fire, then you stretch short. So you've got to start working both these distances in, and you will rarely stretch short if you know what you're doing and you're able to estimate the stretch. So working coupling is either the 50 or 100, or, and I put a caption here, whatever's needed to reach the seat of the fire. So one-story wood frame, all come in different sizes. You know, just because it's a one story, you can't put your all your eggs in one basket thinking you're going to be 50 foot or nothing. The kill zone is a term that a buddy of mine brought me up on, named David Hinojosa. He's a military guy. his kill zone that he used in the military was the max effective range of his weapon. So our weapon is the nozzle. So the max effective range of our nozzle is my kill zone. And that is the distance of available travel minus the needed amount of working hose. So once you get your kill zone set up and your ideas for your district on what your working length is going to be for your types of buildings, your size of your buildings, the amount of compartmentalization, all that has to be factored in, and that equals up to what your kill zone is. And we'll talk about that a little later. The last two go hand in hand. The first one is referred to as a leader line. A leader line operation is an operation with a trunk line with a nozzle on our case and what we teach, used to supply for a long stretch. So we don't use gated Ys, we don't use bell reducers. I can't fight fire very effectively with either of those. So I want to be able to stretch out with the big line and put it in position to where I either can use it up front as a time machine to bring that fire back to where we started or before we even arrived on location, or I can refer back to that if we end up going defensive and it's already there. I don't have to stretch another line. It's just another option, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. And then the last one here is a bundle. Stop calling your hose bundles high-rise packs. If you don't take anything else from this class today, please stop referring to your bundled hose as high-rise packs. A high-rise pack is 2.5-inch hose with an 1.1 or better nozzle that's connected to a standpipe in a high-rise building. So too many times the guys get caught up in this terminology of calling this a high-rise pack when in turn it's just a hose bundle. And you wonder why people bring 1 3/4 into high-rise buildings. So a little pet peeve of mine, but we'll keep moving. The drop location, essentially your assigned task is going to dictate where the drop location is, also what building it's in, and what type of fire that you're looking at. So in this picture right here, we were assigned as the secondary attack line. So in my district, in my protocols, no more than 2 hose lines can pass through one opening at any time in the structure. It just gets too cluttered. We've got too much jammed up in one opening, so we're going to take an alternative. So your assigned task, either the attack line, the backup line, or the secondary attack line, which is what you see right here, us going through this window, is all dependent on your assignment. Like I said, is where you're going to stretch to. So the attack line, the backup line stretched to the front door A side on this building. We did not have access to the back door of this building due to high stock and hoarding conditions. So we ended up coming through this window here. So don't get hung up on using doors only. You can use windows. You can use doors that you turn into doors from windows. Just depends on what your goal is, what you're trained to do, what your protocols are. So just keep in mind that your drop location may not always be the door. So my defaults for residential and commercial are as follows. So the bottom left picture is front door A side all day. So residential structures, I want the front door A side of these buildings in my district because it puts me in the direct pathway of victims in the building, which is why I'm entering the building in the first place, my first goal. So front door A side gives me direct pathway to the arteries of the structure, the stairwell if it's a 2-story, puts me in the direct path of any escaping occupants, like I said, it's the sole reason why we're entering this building in the first place. Rarely would I be stretching to any other location on a residential structure other than the A side front door, unless the building is custom built and it's offset on that piece of land that the front door is in a different location. But in my district, that rarely happens. So we're choosing front door A side for my district. And it may be something different for your district. It may not. But those reasons are why we choose A side front door. I want to put myself in the best position to encounter occupants as quickly as possible, or protect the vertical arteries of the structure, which is the stairwell. You protect the stairs, you protect the building as a whole. So commercial, on the other hand, which you see on the bottom right here, I'm taking the entrance with the shortest path of least resistance to the seat of the fire. So not all commercial buildings are created equal. This one happens to be a Popeye's Chicken Shack. So I can tell a little bit about this fire just from what I'm looking at. So I've got pretty heavy smoke conditions. I know this building to the point to where I know where the kitchen is, I know where the bathroom is, and I know where the dining room is in this building. So this smoke color and the volume of this smoke tells me that this fire is in the kitchen, just from the outside looking at it. So I'm going to enter this building at the point that gives me direct path to the kitchen with the least amount of obstacles. So that actually happened to be the Delta side of this building, which is the door you see the hose line going through here. So just depending on what building you're going to, a Walmart, a Dollar General, a office building, this is going to change where I'm going to stretch depending on where the fire is. I don't want to encounter very many obstacles on my way here, and this particular building actually puts me in the direct line to the kitchen and also the bathroom as well. So the bathroom, the employee workroom back there is on the right as soon as we enter this building. So as soon as we enter this door right here, I've got access to the bathroom, I've got access to the employee workroom, and then directly across from this door is the kitchen. So very rarely would you have fires in these buildings that are originating from the dining room area. Now, granted, can a guy light a fire in a trash can in the dining room? Absolutely, he can. But most likely the smoke level and the color that's being produced here is not being produced from a trash can in the dining room. Now, granted, a judgment call here just by exterior visual cues that we have, but that's what we have to go off of until we know something different. So commercial building, entrance with the shortest path of least resistance, not always the A side here in my personal opinion. So start every day if you can with the daily stretch. So if I come in and I don't like the way the hose is loaded or my fireman doesn't, we're ripping this thing off and we're starting the day with the daily stretch. So this is a good stretch for the daily that I would recommend. No air pack, no mask, just getting reps in here. And essentially, this is how we start our morning every morning, like I said. So my man Cruz here is going to grab the nozzle. He's going to invert the flat load, which we'll go over, and he's going to clear his own bed. So notice he takes all slack with him. I want every bit of that slack to be at the drop point. I don't want to have to be chasing dry or wet hose when I put water in it back to the rig if I need more. So best case scenario, I want one fluid motion with everything we have that we're going to need to make the attack on this structure and make it to the seat of the fire. So speeds up here for time constraints, but he's going to make a wide turn here and he's going to set up perpendicular to the wall that he wants to enter. So right there, he's making his drop plan. So what you can see right here that he's looking at is he's looking at absolutely how much hose he's got on his shoulder here. So we've got identifying features on this flat load. I can see my 100-foot coupling right back here. He can see on his shoulder right here is these 50-foot identifying loops, the nozzle, and 2 bites of hose. So my transverse bed is 6 feet. He knows that. So every bite of that hose is 12 feet of hose. So what he's looking at here is he needs to know whether he can drop here or he needs to do a back stretch. So if he had 150 feet, ended up pulling the bulk load off the back and had more than that, he would have to do a back stretch here. But he's got enough hose in to do a forward stretch, which is best case scenario, in my personal opinion. One fluid motion to the drop, not a whole lot of extra movement with going back and forth, chasing kinks, chasing any kind of folds that we have or anything like that. So he's got his 50-foot identifying loops. Everything below this on his shoulder is 50 feet, and I got 12 and 12. So he's got 74 feet of hose on his shoulder. He needs to split half of that in order to have a clean split here. So he's going to do what we refer to as dropping with a purpose. And dropping with a purpose is getting everything in order. So we don't want these guys to just shuck the hose off their shoulder and then where it lands, and everything's just all miscombobulated there. We want to have some type of order to this. And if you notice here, we've got some identifying features that present themselves immediately when he drops with a purpose. So right now, what he's looking for is he's looking for things that look familiar. He's looking for his nozzle, and he's looking for his 2 couplings that he's going to need. So he's entering the firehouse here on the side of our station, like I said, daily stretch, and he needs 100 foot of hose in this building in order to do what he needs to do. Worst case scenarios, the seat of the fire is in the farthest position away from where he's entering the structure here. So he needs 100 foot, and he's going to place his 100 and his 50 at the drop location, but notice how he does it. The very first thing he's going to do is he's going to isolate the nozzle and that 100-foot coupling, which ended up right here. The next thing he's going to do is drag that 50-foot coupling on top of his 100-foot. So I need both of those lengths of hose inside this structure, but I don't want to put my supply over my attack to create friction from Jump Street. So the very first thing he does is he recognizes he needs 100 feet on his way in. He knows this structure. He's able to, and if he didn't, he would be able to catch 3 sides of the structure pulling in. So he pulls this 100-foot down first. Now he's going to set his nozzle down and come back for the 50-foot as well. So 100 goes down, nozzle goes down, 50-foot comes on top of it here, just so we don't have any friction from Jump Street. So this building that he's entering has an outward opening door, and he made a little mistake here that we corrected, but this is why we do daily stretches. We can't get them right all the time. So one thing that I didn't like about this stretch was this nozzle position right here. So notice how much slack he's got in this hose line here, and this nozzle is pretty close to this door here, which happens to be an outward opening door. So if he was to put water in this hose line right now, very first thing this hose line is going to do is it's going to jump forward, and it's going to impede his ability to open that door. Also, now it puts him in a position to where he's got to drag wet hose back from the structure. Now, granted, I didn't let him finish the stretch, and I didn't have him call for water. He may have pulled this back, but if he didn't, this would be a problem for entering this building right here, just something to think about. So notice also which side of the door he's set up on. So he is entering this building on the middle of a wall. There's no side wall over here, so this is just the middle of the wall. So it doesn't really matter where he sets up, and he knows that. But if he didn't, and he's inside of a residential structure, what we teach our guys to do and in our classes is we set up on the hinge side. And the reason for this is, depending on your local construction, setting up on the latch side just sets me up to be looking at the very first wall that I'm going to encounter in this structure instead of opening things up. So if I set up on the latch side, the very first thing I see when I open that door is a wall. The main body of the fire is going to be shielded by this wall, and I cannot access it from this point. And also, I create a pinch point just by the way that I chose to set this line up at this door. On the contrary, if I know my building construction and I set up on the hinge side of this door, I open it up and automatically I have access to 80% of this room. The main body of the fire is staring me in the face, and I can hit it from where I am right now. Another big benefit of this is I do not have to create a pinpoint right here that I'm going to lose a guy with until I make the seat of the fire. I work on a 3-man engine company. I don't know what your staffing level is, but in my world, I am task saturated and manpower limited. So I do not have the firemen to burn right here at this door in order to facilitate that hose movement for the entire push. So anything you can do to set yourself up for success here to keep that person from having to stay here at this door and being able to bump up and move in to perform a search or help move hose lines, the better. So the only way that you're going to know what your buildings are set up with and how this is going to affect how you're going to stretch inside these buildings is get out and explore these buildings. Every single building that I'm in my district, whether it's a PR, a grocery trip, a medical call, or a fire scene, I'm burning these buildings down in my head. And I would recommend that you do so as well. So I'm looking for everything that's going to be an issue. Do I have hoarding conditions? Which way do the doors swing? Are there any doors inside this structure that don't have that have locking mechanisms on it? Are there any rooms inside this structure that don't have doors on them that I won't be able to isolate during a VES operation? All these things need to be considered when you're burning these buildings down in your head. I run medical calls. My guys, I'm the captain on the rig. My guys are doing patient care until I have to. First thing I'm doing is I'm walking around this structure. I want to get a mental picture of this building. We just got free reign to take a tour of this building since they called 911 and asked us to come there. So take an opportunity to learn something about this building. I ran a lot of bullshit runs in my career, but I've never wasted one. So you can get anything out of any type of call you go on. So this is an example of burning that guy at the front door. So this is my homie's fire. I don't try to guys on YouTube. If I didn't know these guys, this fire wouldn't be in this video. So I've got fire on the A side. I've got 6 feet into this building, maybe making a hallway to the left, and we're in this room. This is bread and butter operation. So notice how they stretched. So that driver put all his slack parallel with this wall instead of being perpendicular with the wall. And now I'm in a position to where I have to burn a guy at this door for the entire push. If we're going to floor Charlie's side of this structure, This sorry bastard has to stay here for this entire push and shuck hose around that corner just because of a decision that we made while stretching and something that we can avoid. So like I said, this is my homie's fire. I ain't hating nobody I don't know. He gave me permission to put this in the video or in the presentation because it just drives home the point that if you take some time to set yourself up for success, you won't have this happen. Like I said, I don't have the guy to burn at this door. I need this guy at the first pinch point in the hallway. And as soon as I get water on the fire, he's able to perform his search if you have that option. So set yourself up for success. Don't park one of your guys at the front door unless you have to, guys. So audibles. Lots of different reasons that we would audible the first hose line. This is A side front door that you're looking at. I got this picture off of Google, so trademark to them. This isn't mine. But a collapse situation on the porch is definitely going to be an audible for me. So imagine this porch is not collapsed already. We've got fire impinging on the collapse or impinging on the porch, preparing it for a collapse, or it just looks sketchy. I'm not dragging hose lines through this front door A side in this particular situation. I'm going to revert back and we're going to audible to the side door or the Charlie side. Now, does that cause more problems for us making the seat of the fire? It can. You know, it can put us in a position where I'm entering in through a laundry room or the kitchen and I have immediate pinch points that I'm met with before I can access the main arteries of the structure. But it's a chance I'm willing to take depending on what the reason for the audible is. So like I said, collapse hazard, I don't want to pull anything through this area right here. I don't want to potentially put myself in a position to where I'm going to lose water supply. And I would recommend you don't. Blitz attacks are going to be an audible for us. So this picture I got off of Google as well, but notice what we're looking at here. So we can learn a little bit about this building just on the drive up. So just as I'm driving up to this building, I can learn a lot about this building and this fire just by what I see here in a snapshot of time. So first thing I see, big red truck. We've got a large amount of fire right here in the garage. So the very first thing I want to do is address this if the man door's closed. So what we're learning about this building right here is I've got a large amount of fire in the garage. I've got a 2-car garage because of the size of it. I've got fire extension already in the attic space of the garage. But what I don't have is fire and smoke at a high level entering this building here. So I can learn a little bit about this building just by looking at it. I don't see black on the windows. I don't see smoke pushing out of the eaves. This gentleman here has the door cracked open. I don't see smoke leaving the underside of this pitch right here. So first thing I learned about this building is it's got a man door or no man door at all, or that man door is closed. So the very first thing I want to do is blitz this garage. So the way we would do it and the way we're going to talk about it later on in the presentation is we would blitz this garage with 2.5. I'm going to blitz it with a 2.5. Deck gun wouldn't be a really good option for me here just because of the angle of that I'm limited with that deck gun. I'm not going to be able to get up and in. 2.5 would be a better call here. We're going to audible from the front door A side here. We're going to stretch the 2.5, blitz the garage. My driver's going to stretch to the A side. So this is something that I would be telling my firemen as soon as we pulled up. We would be an immediate audible. The amount of fortification could be another audible for you guys. So I've got 3 doors here, different levels of security on each one of these doors, but all 3 of these doors, if this is my first option, I'm going to audible. So first option on the left here, I've got a drop bar. I've got some pins on the bottom. This is very easy to bypass with a saw. I'm not talking about us not being able to get through this door at all. What I'm referring to is the reflex time that's going to be added to our stretch getting water on the fire here. So the very first thing that I would do is I would be looking for another way into this building. The middle picture here, what you see is, if you can notice here, this door is welded shut. I immediately regret choosing this door to start with and highly question my reasons for getting through this door at all. If someone took the time to weld this door shut, they do not want anybody entering through this door at all. Could be a wall on the other side, could be high stock. I'm automatically audible here. If this is the only way on the back side of this building, we are in trouble. Now, granted, can we get through it with a saw? Sure. But I really question highly our reason for getting through it in the first place. And the one on the right's probably going to be the easiest out of the three, I would say. It really easy to shave all these carriage bolts off and force this door. It's an outward opening door, so we can shave the carriage off. We can bypass the deadbolt by taking hinges. There's a lot of different ways we can attack this door. And like I said, it's not about not getting through the door at all. It's about adding reflex time to my stretch and getting water on the fire, which is going to be a potential issue for fire growth. So if this is our only way in this building right here because of a collapse up front, or we're been ordered to go through this door here by command, then it is what it is. Break the saw out, start cutting carriage bolts. But if I've got an option, and I've got another option specifically, I'm going to audible this situation. Last audible here is going to be pit bulls. So pit bulls are a big audible for me, man. So depending on whether they're wearing a chain or whether I know this dog because I've been there before, big audible for me. So this is my buddy Jason Fulmer from California. What he does is he encounters a lot of these big pit bulls on where he's at. So what he does is he puts tennis balls in his bunker gear. So if he finds one off the chain or with a chain long enough to get to his guys while he's making the stretch, he'll hum this tennis ball down the road. Dog will chase the tennis ball. So another thing that he told me that chases these tennis balls is truckies. So if you find yourself in a position where you got too many truckies surrounding you and you get a little bit uneasy, just toss the tennis ball or something shiny and they'll chase it down the road. But all jokes aside, big dogs, I've got pit bulls at home, man. My pit bulls will lick you to death if they know you. If they don't know you and you're looking kind of sketchy going through the yard, they're going to have a problem with you. You know, so this could be a huge audible depending on the type of neighborhood that you're working in, the type of relationships you have with these people. You may have been here on a medical call so many times that the dog knows you. Who knows? But if I don't know the dog and he don't know me and he looks a little sketched out, it's an audible for me. So like I was saying earlier, you got to set your guys up for success and make sure that their first audible is not on the fire scene itself. So this is my man Dieter. This is the guy who's stretching in the very first slide of this presentation. So what I told him right here is I've told him your drop point's 150 feet away and you're going to need 50-foot working length. So he's taking all 200 and he's going to shoulder to get there. So he's going to shoulder the line in order to take all 200. And then right there, bam, I audibled on him. So right now, realistic could be questionable, but I wanted to see how he was going to react. So we just took a 150-foot setback and we turned it into 15 feet. So he's done this before. He knows I like to throw in curveballs. He's already in a spot that's less than desirable because he's got 150 foot of hose on his shoulder, but he works it pretty well. He burns his hose like he needs to, chases his own kinks because we're manpower limited. Make sure he's good to go. Got his attack over supply, 50 foot at the front door, calls for water. So you got to make sure these guys are on their toes in training because if they're going to fail in this area right here, they're going to fail anywhere else if you don't take the time to fix it. So don't let them have their first audible on the fire scene. And I've got lots of videos at the end of this presentation of these two guys specifically in this video right here, making some pretty poor stretches. But it's important to make those poor stretches in training so they don't make those poor stretches on the fire ground itself. So your setback, like I said earlier, is your rig to drop. And depending on what type of neighborhood you're working in, if you've got a homeowners association or not, is going to be how your setbacks are set up. So these are two areas in my first due. There's several of these in my first due, but these are the two that I just picked to throw in this presentation. And this is what I call triple killers, man. We are shouldered hose always just for these situations right here. So these places ain't got no HOA. They've got nothing but junk inside these yards, man. So imagine putting 200 feet of hose on the ground in the triple or in a bulk bed format, not able to shoulder hose and having to go over all these obstacles here. So these are some extreme issues that you're going to have if you've got one guy stretching and everything that you're pulling off the rig hits the ground before you can negotiate it. So like I said, the best case for us in our area is shoulder as much as hose as possible. So we shoulder 150 foot of that 200 or even more on the 2.5 if we're going long. So just depending on where you work, like I said, shouldered hose is a better call for us. You may have clean driveways and yards in your front. You know, you may have 15 to 20 foot step backs. This second video right here is 150-foot setback. If I have straight shot to the truck, or straight shot from the truck to the building, but I don't have that. I've got obstacles I've got to build in. And this is where your kill zone comes in, and thinking about your hose lines as two different lengths. So travel hose. This can be calculated by getting intimate with your rig. So you've got to know ins and outs of your hose is loaded. I would recommend taking a measuring tape and getting all your measurements on your rig. So this is engine 155. This is my rig that I ride in East Montgomery County. So we've got some measurements here that we've had our guys commit to memory because it's important. So the truck's 32 feet long. From the transverse bed, I've got 17 feet to the back bumper. I've got 15 feet to the front. My transverse bed is 6 foot deep. So I know every bite of hose is 12 feet. My rear bed is 12 foot. So every bite of hose off the back of my rig, which is a bulk bed and a two and a half options, I know that every bite of hose is 24 feet. Having this baseline knowledge will set me up to estimate and pull the exact amount of hose that I'm looking for. Now, granted, can there be some things that change? Could I add an obstacle in there that I don't see around a corner? Sure. But being able to estimate the stretch is a lost art that has been caused by the pre-connect. And like I said, I would really recommend that you take some measuring tapes, you get your crew together, make a day out of it, get very intimate with your rig. So the reason my distances from the back bumper and the front bumper are important is if I have a unidirectional load, like the traditional Minuteman that I can't pull through to the other side of the rig, if I'm forced to stretch off the officer side of the rig and the fire's on the driver's side, these distances may come into play, and they definitely have to be added into your travel hose. So we run a bidirectional hose load, so I can pull both those transverse beds off either side of the truck. But if you don't, you need to start thinking about this. Now, is 17 feet or 15 feet really a huge problem? Just depends on what your situation is and what your assignment is. Am I going to an exposure? Am I going to the next building? Am I blocked out from the ladder truck? All things need to be considered and added into your travel hose. So what you burn at the rig, plus your setback and obstacles, all travel hose, not even talking about working hose yet. This truck is a drastically different truck. So this is engine 4, which is a tanker, but we call it an engine, so it makes all the fires. So this truck, on the other hand, is 22 feet long, 22 feet long from the transverse bed to the rear, 15 feet to the front, 37 total, and has a 20-foot bed off the rear, 6-foot transverse bed. So if I'm pulling off the rear of this rig and stretching past the truck itself, I'm already counting 37 feet off my stretch already, just by the simple fact that the truck is 37 feet long. So can't always choose your apparatus placement. You don't always have the best option. You may be second, third, fourth in. Could be assigned to pull a backup line or another line or an exposure line, and you need to factor these distances in. So get intimate with your rig, find out what your distances are, add those into your stretch plan so you won't come up short. And this is an expected surprise here that you can solve with a measuring tape in about 15 minutes. Your working hose, on the other hand, is going to depend on a few things, depending on your district. Number one, structure type for me. So structure type, I'm starting out with the baseline 50 foot. Now, does that mean I'm always going to be pulling 50 foot on residential? No. As you can see here, we've got two drastically different one-story residentials on the top here. But if I'm going to a residential fire and I'm stretching, I already have in my mind the very minimum that I'm taking to the door with me is a 50-foot length. And everything I see on my approach when I make the block is going to determine what is added on top of that 50 foot. So the size of the structure is definitely going to play a part in it. As you can see on the top left here, I got an 800, 1,000 square foot, one story, very cookie cutter neighborhood type building. I'm going to need 50 foot of hose inside this structure, and that'll get me to the back wall, the back room, and in the attic. It's going to be exactly enough hose that I need here. And the only thing that would change is if I'm going through the garage and then into the structure. And I'd be really willing to bet that 50 foot's going to get me everywhere I need to go, even if I had to do that. Building on the right up here on top right, that is a drastically one-story wood frame structure. So be careful putting in your protocols or getting in your mind that I'm only going to need 50 foot. It's a good starting point to jump off at, but your houses in your district are going to determine how much hose you're going to need inside of them. So like I said earlier, use your medical calls to your advantage. Get inside this one-story residential on the right and see what the compartmentalization is like. I'd be willing to bet that I'm going to encounter more compartmentalization on the top left than I am on the right. It's going to be an open floor plan, but I've got more square footage to cover. So I'm probably going to need 100, 150 foot of hose, depending on where I need to go and where I'm going to be accessing the fire at. So if I end up on the Charlie Delta corner of this building and I have to go into the attic and come back to the Bravo side, I'm going to need a good amount of hose, and 50 feet ain't going to cut it, Jack. Two-story residential on the bottom here. I've got my 2,000, 1,500 square foot cookie cutter two-story residential on the left. 75 foot of hose will get me where I need to go in this building, plus about 15 feet added for the stairs. So we've got about 100 foot of hose that's going in this building. Worst case scenario. So fire on the first floor, I may only need 50. Just depends on where the seat of the fire's at. On the bottom right here, I've got the two-story colonial that is a drastically different home. So I'm going to need a huge amount of hose inside this building, maybe even 150, depending on where I'm going, to be able to access everything inside this structure. So like I said, be careful about putting dead set protocols on your guys and handcuffing them to pull 50 foot on residential or 100 foot on commercial. These residential structures are drastically different in size. Commercial, usually you're going to be able to get away with 100 feet, and that would be my starting point. Is if I know I'm going to a commercial fire, and unless they add details in like Walmart or Dollar General or HEB or something like that, I'm going to start out with the mindset of 100 foot of hose inside this structure. So one-story commercial on the left side here, 100 foot of hose will get me everywhere I need to go in that building. All nooks and crannies, and even in the common attic up there, 100 foot of hose is no problem there. One-story commercial on the right, I've got a drastically different amount of compartmentalization, number one, and the amount of square footage inside this building. I could possibly need 150 to 200 to get everywhere I need to go in this building. But like we talked about earlier, choosing your drop point here will eliminate the need for a lot of that hose depending on the fire load. So if I've got a small fire in one of these bays right here, obviously the front door of this building is not a good call for me. I'm going to have to encounter a higher level of compartmentalization, because most likely the left side of this is going to be office space that translates into the shop space on the right, or storage, just depending on what this building was meant for. It says a school on top, but who knows how this building is built on the initial point when they built this building. So with this being a banner up here, I doubt this is why this building was built. So choosing your drop points is very important. It could cut off a lot of unneeded hose that you need, just like a vertical stretch in a multifamily. Two-story commercial on the bottom left here, 100, 110 foot of hose will get me everywhere I need to go here. On the bottom right, two-story commercial as well. I need a drastically different amount of hose to get everywhere I need to go in that building. But choose your drop point correct. Get three sides of the building, get a really good determination on where the fire is, and you can solve a lot of those problems from occurring in the first place. Your kill zone is your stretch capability, like we talked about earlier. So it's the max effective range of your weapon, and your weapon is the nozzle. So this is my rig that we were looking at earlier. So my kill zone right off the bat on my transverse bed is either 200 feet or 400 feet. Because we've got a quick connect deployment that we do with that flat load that I could turn that 200 foot into a 400 foot in less than a minute. So my kill zone there, without the thought process of working hoses, 400 on the transverse bed, 400 on my bulk bed, and 300 or 600 on my 2.5 back here. So once we start adding into the working length, I immediately start losing hose. So if I'm looking at the building when I make the block, and I know that I'm only going to need 50 foot of hose in that structure, my kill zone just dropped. Now I'm at 150 or 350, 550 or 250, just depending on what our situation is. If I need 100 foot working length, immediately subtract that from my travel hose. So if I'm rolling up making the block, I look at this building and I know I need 100 foot. I automatically subtract that 100-foot working length off of whatever links I have on my rig. So if you run an only pre-connect department, you should really start considering putting a dead bed on the back of your rig to start thinking about those longer extended stretches there. So immediately I roll and hit the block. I know I'm going to need 100-foot working length. Here are my options right here. So if it's a setback of 100 feet, then I'm good with my transverse bed, and it's 1 3/4 fire. If I've got longer than 100-foot setback, I automatically know I'm going to either to the rear or I'm adding them together to make my quick connect there to make my 300 foot. So if you start thinking about your hose lines as 2 different lengths and not just one pre-connected link, you will rarely stretch short in these situations. So at that point, make a quick determination on how much hose you're going to need in the structure. Obviously, it's going to be an estimation because you don't know all sides of the structure until you make your 360. I may need to film on something that I see on the back side of this structure before we make entry, but let's work probable and then work possible. So we roll up, I see 100 foot. All I got to do is think about setback, and it automatically tells me which line I'm going to be pulling off my rig. Leader line operation is what we use to go long. Also what we use for a blitz attack, as it says. So it's the best case to have an attack and supply in one line, in my personal opinion, and what we teach. If I had a 3-inch with a bell reducer on the end of it or a gated Y, I cannot use that to fight fire with. I cannot use it to blitz. I cannot use it very well to put water where I need to go, which is why we stretch out with 2.5 and a nozzle. So the blitz and bundle option is a great option for us. We use that 300 gallons a minute. We use a 1 3/16. It's a 300 gallon a minute time machine that I'm able to bring that fire back down to the level when we got dispatched or when it got called in from the first show. So 2.5 hose with a nozzle. I want to position this leader line for attack if possible. Sometimes you're not going to be able to do that. But if I have enough hose and able to position this line for attack, that's exactly what I want to do. Even if I'm not going to attack with it, I want to put it in a position to where I can revert back to it if I need to do so. Wall falls down, roof caves in, horns start blowing. They put us in a defensive posture. I don't have to stretch another line. If I bundled off of this line to start with, all I have to do is disconnect the bundle and I'm back in business. So lastly here, you want to tie off the bail just like anything else. If you're using a gated Y operation, tie the valve open when you stretch off of it. Please do so. They're notorious for having self-closing issues. I can send you some videos if you don't believe me. I didn't put any of them in this presentation because that's not why I'm here. I'm not hating on the Y. If you're forced to use the Y or you like Y operations, keep doing it. I just have some bigger benefit here with the ability to use this 2.5 line for attack as well. So if you'll notice on the bottom right here, this line is not strapped open. And I put this picture in here specifically for this reason. There are a lot of people using these fire by trade straps, and these are the best straps that I have found for hose bundles and high-rise packs, actual high-rise packs on the market. There's nothing out there that beats them in my personal opinion. But one of the biggest issues that I have with this strap is that it's difficult to strap this nozzle open and keep it in a position to where it will not be jerked open with hose movement or anybody kicking it or anything like that. So I put this picture specifically in here because that nozzle bail is not secured. So this is my man, Philip Baird, here on the right. He teaches with us for FD Tactics. I like to bring him into my classes, even though he doesn't like to teach lecture. So my man here is going to be talking Ben through this blitz and bundle option. He's going to be talking you guys through it too. So this was a conference that we taught at in the Dalles, Oregon. It was called the Worst Fire Conference. So it happened to be one of the best ones that we had that year, but as a joke, they called it the Worst Fire Conference to see if anybody would come to it. So here's my man Baird. He's going to talk to you about blitz and bundle here.
All right, so Ben is making a blitz attack. He's hitting this fire with at least 265 gallons. So he's getting a good blitz on this fire. He's making progress. He's knocking it down. Tyler comes up with the bundle. Now we're going to extend off into this door for us. We're going to knock it down. We'll finish it off. We're kicking his ass. We've got it on the ground. We're going to ground the pound. Tyler comes up and he just sets the pack down. Straps it. Straps are really good, guys. These fire by trade straps, they are awesome. They're the best ones I found. So we open the bundle up just like he did, right? He hands the female over to just somewhere near. So now Captain says, hey, you're going to shut it down. You're the captain. I'm good. So he shuts it down. I kneel on that so he doesn't accidentally pull it out from underneath you. Kneel on it. Now when he drags his hose out, he's not going to steal it. So grab it. Tape and tape.
All right, so this bundle is set up in what we would refer to as a knee bundle. Essentially, it is a flat load. It can be a Minuteman, it can be a flat load, it can be a horseshoe bundle. It's all the same. So a couple things that we like to do when we make these bundles is we make identifying features on them. So what he just told him is to grab tape and tape. So as you can see here, there's two pieces of tape here. I personally use paint on my bundles or all my hose at my department, but you may be in a situation to where you are not allowed to paint your hose, or your hose is so dilapidated that you don't want to paint it, or it's brand new and you don't want to tape it or paint it. I've heard all different excuses from around the country. But what you can do is just throw some electrical tape on it. It's going to pop off when the hose is charged, and you're going to have to reapply it. But my personal opinion, the more identifiers on all these lines, the better. It guarantees the equal split. So what you can see here, I'm looking at 3 identifiers here. I've got the 25 foot of the bottom section taped off. I've got the 25 foot of the top section taped off. And I've also got my working coupling right here, which is my 50 foot. So what he just told Ben to do is he's going to grab tape and do what's referred to as a back stretch.
Just walk back. And as you're going, you can kind of flake it a little bit. He's going to spin the tip. Directly too.
And then bam. Identifiers make it an equal split every single time. You don't have to guess on which loop it is.
So now right here, when your hose is going,
It's a good tip right here.
this is a back. When it's going back, pull you a little bit up here. That way, that has plenty of room to bend and it doesn't kink. If we're right here, it's going to try to kink. We don't want that. So we're going to do this. All right, so Ben wasn't in the front door because then he was 15 feet back. So Tyler calls for water, but Tyler's going to the door now. So Tyler grabs that coupling. Tyler comes up here. All right, boom. Now Tyler's at the door. Charge. He charges. Boom. We're ready to go. We got that 50 foot at the door, just like what we need to be worried about with this bell. Oh yeah. Come on now.
Webbing's a little bit long for my liking, but my man had webbing in his pocket and it was Johnny on the spot with it. Couple things here. I'm gonna turn this down for a second. I would not recommend this screw type carabiner. So this screw type carabiner is great for rescue situations. It's horrible for hose work, in my personal opinion. So what I would recommend either is a non-locking carabiner or a twist lock carabiner that has no threads on it, just a quarter twist and it pops open. And the reason for that is I have mud everywhere in my district. If you're dropping this bundle down in the yard, you're going to get mud on it. It may not be this one that bites you, but the next one might if you don't clean your carabiner out. Another thing that I usually find in my pockets is drywall, insulation, just ash, pieces of wood, pieces of burning material, all in my pockets, man. So like I said, I would not recommend the screw type carabiner for anything but rescue operations. You want to have a setup for rescue operation for a pick off or for a drag, more power to you. My personal opinion, I would not recommend this for any type of hose work, non-locking or quarter turn.
Now, when we got a charged hose, you'll see how you can get that really tight. That's great, man. That's perfect. I carry this one. It's shorter, so it's less to deal with, but it's the same thing. You can do it with these straps. I'm just not a big fan of it. You got to do it a certain way before it's really cold. But if you just do simply what he did, even if you made something that's short, just 2 loops on the end, reach it, and then push it. I like to, so if my nozzle was up here, I'm going to hook it to the right side of the nozzle.
It's a good little tip right here.
I like to go opposite of the hose. That way it really cinches if somebody were to kick. So I've got my hitch over here. So So I really like to hook my carabiner in there. That way, if it does get kicked, it cinches this down even tighter. So it ain't going nowhere. If you set it right, it's not going to go anywhere. You'll see later when we charge it that it's not going to go anywhere. So really good. A man had.
All right. So like you said, we recommend a short piece of webbing. We teach with a short piece of webbing when we teach bundle and blitz in our classes for first engine due. That piece of webbing there is about 18 to 24 inches long, depending on which one he brought with him. And like he said, man, when you cinch it down on a charge line, this is later on that day, it's not coming loose when you kick it. So you kick this thing all you want. You can jerk that hose line around all you want, and it's not coming loose. And he's got that twist lock carabiner here. That's one that we would recommend. So very easy to apply. And as long as you set it right, it's not coming loose. So whatever you choose to do on how you extend your hose lines, we obviously prefer this method because I can fight fire with it. Whatever you choose to do, just make sure you strap your bail open or your valve open whenever you extend off of it. Last thing you want to do is have water loss when you don't have to.
Just walk back.
So just because your leader line's described in a bundle doesn't mean it always has to come out of a bundle. So this is a situation that we had a really long stretch. I couldn't put the 2.5, and this is just us training at the firehouse. I could not put the 2.5 where I wanted to be for the attack. So I grabbed my 200-foot transverse bed, disconnected with the pigtail that we'll talk about here in a little bit, and I'm going to extend off the 2.5 here. So he's got 150 foot of 2.5 on the ground here, and we're going for a long stretch. So I got 150 foot of 2.5. Notice how I grabbed it when I grabbed it off of the transverse bed. I grabbed 150 on my shoulder, and I left the last 50 foot here. So I've already disconnected it from the pigtail, and that pigtail comes in really handy to make this operation fluid. So I'm grabbing the first 150 foot, and I'm going to shoulder it. And I reach back for that last 50 foot that's in the bed to make my 200-foot stretch. And the reason I do that is because I want to give myself some time to keep stretching. I don't want to slow the stretch down. So I've got my 150 on my shoulder. I'm going to take the last 50 with me, and that's the room that I'm going to have for my 2.5 guy to make that connection point. So I've got 200 feet of hose on my shoulder right now. Nothing's dragging. As soon as I get to the end of this 150 foot 2.5, I'm going to drop that last 50 feet there. So that gives him enough time to where he can pin that coupling down where it's at. And I'm not in a position to where I'm dragging away from him. And I also don't have to stop the forward momentum of the stretch. It just cuts time off. So I get to my man Cruz here. He's waiting on me to get there with the coupling. I'm going to drop that coupling in that last 50 foot section. He's going to pin it with his knee or his foot, and I'm going to keep stretching. As soon as it gets tight, everything starts flaking off the top of my shoulder, which you'll see here in a little bit. And I'm stretching the last 200 or 150 foot. So I'm setting up at this building right here through this door, make my wide turn, come back perpendicular, drop with a purpose, drop and drag about 3 feet to get everything in line, grab things that look familiar. My coupling, which is taped, my nozzle, shake sheets to the drop. One fluid motion. Got a small kink to fix there, but that would blow out when they put water in it anyway, but my man fixes it because he's a big overachiever. So there we go. Just because you are thinking about this leader line operation in a bundle situation doesn't mean it has to be limited to a bundle. Now, granted, best case scenario would be for me to put this 2.5 in a position to where I can use it for attack and supply, but I couldn't do that here. So we've got a longer lay. We made a fire last year. We put 1,000 feet of hose around to make the drop point, and still had 100 feet to go from there. So start looking in your district and find these problem areas and find a plan to work with them. Bundles. Next thing up is, like I said earlier, guys, please stop calling this a high-rise pack. If you have an 1 3/4 bundle, call it what it is. It's a hose bundle. And people wonder why people are still carrying 1 3/4 into high-rise buildings. A high-rise pack, the words high and rise are in the description of that piece of equipment. The FBI would call that a clue. 1 3/4 hose, either in 50 foot like you see on the top right, or 100 foot down here is going to be a hose bundle. As long as we start speaking the same language, we'll be getting the same pieces of equipment when they're called for. So like it says up here, I recommend 100 foot at least for the bundle. If you need more bundled hose than that or less, you'll know better than I do. Just depends on your district and what you're comfortable with. But I've got 3 types of hose bundles here. The very first one on the bottom left is that horseshoe bundle that we talked about. This is on my rig on the officer's side. The hose bundle here in the middle is what's referred to as the Metro bundle. The first guy who ever showed me that bundle was Brian Brush. At the very first time that he made this bundle and started advertising it in an article that he wrote, he worked at West Metro Fire, so they called it the Metro bundle. So notice here, it's the same thing as an accordion or a horse, or it's an accordion right now. It's the same thing as a horseshoe bundle. It's just flat. It can be a Minuteman. It can be a flat. You can bend it over to turn it into a horseshoe. It's the most adaptable hose bundle in my personal opinion. I don't have to flip anything out to get it to deploy. I can deploy it off my shoulder if I need to. There's a lot of options here that you can do with it. The horseshoe will turn into this. This will turn into the horseshoe. And then the last one up here on the top right, this is the Portland bulk load. So I've been lucky enough to be able to teach at PDX for the last 2 years. Hopefully we'll have a third one, but I assist with teaching the Beyond the Pre-Connect class there at PDX. If any of you've gone to PDX, I would definitely recommend the comp, but signing up for the Beyond the Pre-Connect class. It's all about the bulk bed. It's all about vertical stretches, whether it's coupling drop or rope drop. I would really recommend going through the class. It'll really open your mind up on the bulk bed. I was kind of iffy on the bulk bed before I was asked to teach this. So thankfully I was asked to help teach about a year before, and I ended up loading a bulk bed on my rig to start playing with it, start getting some tips and tricks. And I spent a full 365 days before I started doing anything with this. So I would recommend that you at least consider a bulk bed option. It's great for long, short, and in between that we'll talk about here in a little bit, but it does have some disadvantages. So a couple things about the bundle that I would also recommend is keep it accessible. You know, there's no reason to put anything on top of this bundle that's not coming out with the bundle. So I worked overtime one day on a shift, and they had the bundle and the dunnage on top, had foam buckets and low-level strainers and all sorts of shit on top of it. And I was really just disappointed that if I needed this bundle in a quick time frame, I wasn't going to get it. So thankfully, when I checked my rig in the morning, I found out this was an issue, and I fixed the problem. But if you'll notice here on the bottom left, this is my rig here. The only thing on top of this bundle is the irons that are coming with me anyway. You know, so the very first thing I step off and grab as the officer is the irons. We now have a truck company, but where I'm at on the north side of the district, that truck company could be third or fourth in, depending on where they're coming from. But very first thing I grab when I get off the rig, no matter what, is these set of irons. So it's not impeding my process to get that bundle. So if I need the bundle, I'm grabbing both of those anyway. And like it says here, never miss an opportunity to get in the game. So if I'm arriving on location and I do not have an assignment, I'm bringing 2 bundles. So I've actually got 2 bundles on my rig. I've got this one here, and I've got 100 foot on top of my bulk bed. So if I arrive on location, I don't have an assignment. I came off of an engine company. My job is put water on the fire. Could be to protect exposures. The easiest way to jump in front of guys in the staging list is be ready to work. Show up ready to be put to work. If I grab 2 of these bundles and show up to the command post and there needs to be another line in place, all I got to say is, Chief, I got hose right here. All I got to do is put water in the back end of this thing. Put me in, coach. And that's how you jump up above guys in the staging. So a little pro tip there, but never miss an opportunity to get in the game. If I'm showing up for RIT, I'm assigned RIT. I've already got my dedicated RIT line that I'm bringing with me. So never miss an opportunity. Keep them accessible. So when you make the block, you should be glued to that window if you're the pipeman. I'm already glued to the window or across the truck if the fire's on the driver's side as a company officer. But I want you to be glued to that window. You should be seeing everything that's going to be in your way, all 3 sides of the structure as we pass by it, and take note of everything that's going to be an issue. Start calculating your working hose by the size of the building, get an idea of your setback and obstacles in the way to start thinking about your travel hose, and then boom, with the knowledge of those 2 things, you can make your determination. Am I coming off a pre-connect? Am I going long? Do I have a bulk bed option? All of these things are running it through your mind immediately as long as you're taking everything as you roll up. So spot everything and absolutely ask for help if you need to. So my fireman knows that if he needs help, he needs to ask for help with the stretch, which is either going long or doing a split option that we'll talk about here in a minute. He needs to say that before the air brake hits. I've got officer shit to do. My driver's got driver shit to do. So if you need help with that stretch, you need to say something immediately once you realize you need help with the stretch. So the way we've got it worked out in the back of the rig on engine 155 is that my fireman will tell me either I need help or I've got the stretch. And that tells me and the driver whether or not that he needs help with that stretch. And it's immediately when the air brake hits. So he sees everything. He communicates his plan. If I hear I got the stretch, I ain't worried about it. If it's a residential structure, I know he's default A-side front door until I tell him something different. If we're on a commercial building, he's going to wait for me to tell him where we're going to enter this building. And this may be after we do the 360, or at least pop my head around the backside of the building to see that backside, to see if anything stands out for an audible or an easier way into this structure, or this large smoke plume coming out of this commercial building, maybe a dumpster on fire in the back. So always got to take a look at all sides, try to figure out how and where you're going to stretch, and communicate that plan with all your people. So taking everything into account that we've talked about so far, making the stretch, you really should pump the brakes here. So there's certain operations on the fire ground that need a quick, aggressive tempo. In my personal opinion, you need to pump the brakes a little bit on the stretch. I've got one shot to get this stretch right. I need to take in all factors. I need to choose wisely on my line selection so I don't have to repeat the process by either choosing a bigger line or a longer line. Pump the brakes, take a minute to make a minute. Take only what you need. If possible, estimate the stretch. We'll talk about taking brake here in a little bit for the bulk bed option or even the transverse bed, depending on how you load it. Only take what you need. Take the path of least resistance to the drop point. I want as much hose as possible at the drop point so I don't have to come back and extend that line or be in a position to where I've got a pull hose that's wet and full of water around obstacles or anything like that. I want to clear the bed, take all the slack to the drop. Best case scenario for one fluid motion to clean forward is best for time and efficiency, as it says. And depending on what building you're looking at, 100 foot, 50 foot, 150 foot coupling needs to be at the building itself to facilitate the movement into that structure. Attack over supply if you've chosen to have 100 foot coupling versus your 50, and then only call for water when ready. I've taught at fire departments that have protocols in their guidelines and protocols that state in 30 seconds, I'm charging your line. In 90 seconds, I'm charging your line. I would recommend against this, to be honest with you. The only person that needs to be calling for water in that line is the fireman. If I still have 75 foot of hose on my shoulder and you send water through that line, we're going to have some words about it. So I would really recommend having some type of either audible signal over the radio, a hand signal if you're in sight, some type of communication to where from your fireman to your driver to be able to call for water at that point. So hose loads, going through the 4 main types of hose loads. And the first thing I will tell you is that nobody can tell you what hose load you should be running. The only way that you can know what hose load that you're running or that you need to run is knowledge of your district, knowledge of your staffing, and the abilities of your equipment. So do not allow anybody on Facebook or YouTube or at conferences tell you what you should be running. The only people that are going to know what you should be running is the people who work in your district. And we're going to address the triple fold here in just a second, Cameron, or Cameron. I hope it's Cameron because that'd be much cooler. We'll go through the 4 types, but nobody can tell you what you should be running. Nobody at all, except for the people that are in your district. It is. We'll see. All right. First up's a Minuteman. We're going to go through pros and cons of each different load. So the Minuteman, pros for the Minuteman is it's set up for shouldering already. I chose this picture in particular because this is a traditional Minuteman. There's no way that nozzle's being pulled through the other side of the transverse bed due to the bail and due to the size of this single stack right here in the first place. So this is a traditional Minuteman. Now you can do a modified Minuteman where you have them side by side. You've got the top section strapped with the nozzle coming up to where you can pull it off both sides of the truck. Just depends on what you're working with. But this is a traditional Minuteman. Pros for this load, in my personal opinion, it's set up for shouldering already. Shouldered hose will smoke any hose on the ground any day of the week with obstacles, with turns, with long setbacks. Shouldered hose is the way to go. No drag, no snag, in my personal opinion. Can be bi-directional, like I said, and how you can make this bi-directional is you can take this nozzle section, extend it about 3 feet up, and throw it on top of this load up here, and even strap it if you have to. I personally don't like the strap because it's one more step, but can be bi-directional if you make it so. There's only 100 foot on the shoulder, which is a big pro for a lot of people. This is a single stack, 100-foot stack. Very easy to V-split as you're coming up to do a forward stretch or a back stretch, depending on where you're going. Identifying features are very easy to see here and can easily be a bundle. I can automatically disconnect this line, and I've got a 100-foot bundle right out the gate. So cons to everything. One of the biggest cons with this versus the flat load that we're going to go through is that I'm dragging half of this load no matter what I do. Half of this load is going to have to hit the ground, and I'm dragging it around and through obstacles. That's a con for me personally. Most of the time it's unidirectional, being a traditional Minuteman here in this setting without the nozzle on top. This is a unidirectional load, meaning I can only pull it off of one side of the rig, which is most likely why you have this second pre-connect on this rig facing out the other side, because this particular Minuteman is a unidirectional load. It can be bi-directional if you choose to do so. So lastly, obstacles can be difficult to negotiate for that first section there. So after you get the dump load 100 foot on the ground, everything comes off the shoulder, very easy to navigate obstacles. But if I meet obstacles out the gate directly off the side of the rig, I'm going to have some trouble here unless I have some people to help me with that. And your staffing level is going to be able to assist you with this. Nothing wrong with the Minuteman. Just got to consider pros and cons. Don't let anybody on Facebook or YouTube tell you should be running a load. Throw it on your rig, go stretch it in your district. With your knowledge base, with your abilities, with your staffing level, determine what you need to be running at that point. Triple load. This for you, Cameron, my man. The pros of the triple load. The pros of the triple load is it's fast. In a 66-foot straight stretch with no obstacles, the triple load will smoke any other load out there. No, hands down, no argument there. It's really easy to learn because all you have to do is pull it out of the rig and grab the nozzle and run with it. So everything has cons, and one of the biggest cons for me is this the devil's load, Jack. You can't make this up. 200 divided by 3 is 66.66666666 feet. That's the devil's load, man. You can't argue with that. That's arithmetic, brother. So cons to this as well. What you got to say, my man? Oh, yeah, I do. I'll get you. Any stretch that's not straight's more difficult. Not impossible. It's not impossible at all. It just adds some reflex time to it. So it leaves the 50-foot working length 50 foot away every single time, unless you have that split pull that you're waiting on that coupling to come out and you grab it while it's in the air and then hustle off with it. So there's some different adaptations you can do with this. There's no shoulder option whatsoever with the triple load. I've got to get everything out of it before I can do anything else with it. And I'm dragging the entire load for the entire stretch. And obstacles are definitely a problem, more so with the triple versus others. Now, granted, going back to the pro column, if all of your stretches in your district are 66-foot straight stretches with no obstacles, it would be dumb for you to be running anything but the triple load. It will smoke anything else in that particular setting. But if you've got multifamilies, if you've got high levels of obstacles in your district, if you've got a lot of long setbacks in your district, longer than 66 feet, it may need to be considered to run something else. Like I said, nobody can tell you what you need to be running. And I couldn't fit this con on the bottom because there's just so many with it that I couldn't fit it all up there. The biggest one for me is that I have to put 200 feet on the ground if I need any of it. If I need 50 feet, I got to put 200 on the ground. If I need 100 feet, I got to put 200 on the ground every single time. And my man Howard says it best, is that hose is like toilet paper. If you pull too long, it wads up. And if you pull too short, you're holding shit. So having the exact amount of hose on the ground is a big benefit for a lot of places in my district. I've got to be able to estimate the stretch and put what I need on the ground, break it, and leave it there. Bulk load. Bulk load is already set up for shouldering. It's a big plus for me, in my personal opinion. I can take what I need and leave the rest. I can break it. It just happens to be loaded 500-foot bulk load. This is the Portland bulk load that you're looking at right here. Same from the other picture that we had here. I've got 50 feet, and there's a couple different ways you can do this bulk load. Just find out how much room you have on your rig and how you're going to be able to do it. But this particular bulk load is 50 foot on your shoulder, and every single one of these sets of 3 loops is another 50-foot section. You can't see it under here, but there's a half loop that is identifier for that 50-foot section. So what you have here is you have 300 up and 200 down for a total of 500 feet for this bulk load. And that's the Portland bulk load. So pros for the bulk load, it's already set up for shouldering. I pull my 50 foot out, I can shoulder that, and I can shoulder and invert the rest of it if I need to. I've got the potential to take every single one of these as a 50-foot section. I just estimate what I need and then leave the rest. It's got really easy identifiers. Like I said, I've got 50 here. Every single one of these rows is 50. So there's no question for either me as the fireman or the captain or the driver to determine how much hose is left the bed. Every single set that leaves the bed leaves an identifier missing. Biggest plus for it, it's good for long, short, and in between. So my personal opinion, you should at least consider having some type of bulk bed option on the rear of your rig if you're in areas that you're going to be stretching long. And I've seen very few areas that you're not going to have a potential for a long stretch. So if you haven't thought about it already, start thinking about the long game and be able to set your guys up for success prior to. Cons, just like everything else, takes heavy staffing to deploy fast and well. Can one guy deploy this hose? Sure. It's going to go just that much faster if 2 guys and 3 guys are there. So Portland actually runs 4 guys on their rig, so they have a good amount of staffing there that they're able to put hose on the ground very quick and very efficient. If you don't have 4 guys on your rig, or you're only running with 2, meaning the driver and the officer, this would be a consideration that's going to take you a little bit more time. And it's a con for the reason of that. You know, so I'm limited to one way of stretching, which is off the rig. I can't make it a triple. I can't make it a minute man. It's a bulk bed no matter what. Pretty much the only adaptation that I can do with this is invert it as I pull it out so it pays off my shoulder instead of me having to put stuff on the ground. So has a high chance of dragging hose. The benefit of this is they only utilize 6 foot of this back bed back here. So it's a 6 foot lane here. So every bite is going to be approximately 12 feet, depending on the length of the pull loops here. And every single one of these is a 50-foot section. So I can easily do it without dragging hose, but if I'm limited on manpower, I'm automatically going to be putting hose on the ground to drag, which is a con in my opinion. And depending on your staffing level, obstacles can be a problem if you don't have enough people to work those pinch points around the obstacles itself. Oh man, I'm hung up here. Hang on. All right, flat load. Anybody that knows me personally or has seen anything I put out, I'm kind of partial to the flat load. So that's what we're going to be talking about for the rest of this presentation, is running the flat load. The flat load, the biggest pro to it is it's all other loads. I can pull it as a flat, I can pull it as a minute, I can pull it as a triple, and I can pull it as a bulk bed. It allows the pipeman to choose that stretch type depending on what they're looking at. The flat load is the most underrated and underutilized load off the transverse bed out of everything that we've talked about here. And I'm going to show you some different things that you can do with it for the rest of this presentation. So it's already set up for shouldering. It's got easy identifiers. It's automatically bi-directional just by the nature of it being a flat load. I've got nozzle on top. I can pull it off of either side of the rig, and I can take what I need and leave the rest. It's essentially a bulk bed that happens to be pre-connected at either 200 or 400 feet, depending on if we choose to add both of these together for the long stretch. Everything has cons, and this one does as well. And the biggest con out of it is there are 5 different methods that you can deploy this hose with. That is a pro and also a con for a lot of people. So a lot of guys out there just aren't into the job like you guys. If you're here and you're attending this webinar and you paid out of your pocket, I would say that you're into the job. But there's a lot of guys out there that aren't, and they are not going to put forth the effort to affect all 5 types and how to deploy this. So what usually happens, and what you can see the majority on YouTube with flat loads, is they pull everything out of the bed, and it hits the deck right in front of the actual rig itself, and then they stretch out the spaghetti and chase kinks. So my least favorite method of deploying the flat load, and I'll make you a little better with it as we go on, but it's a big con for a lot of people that they have to learn 5 different stretch types. And you don't have to, but you would be way better at stretching this load if you did know all 5. The other biggest con with this, specifically with very rigid and low pressure design hose, is that 150 foot on the shoulder can be hard to manage for some people. Depending on how big you are, how wide your shoulders are, your experience level, your body weight, your strength, it may put you in a position where 150 feet may not be the best bet for you on your shoulder. We haven't had a whole lot of people have a whole lot of trouble with it, but we teach all over the country, and there's always usually one guy there or one girl there that has trouble putting 150 on the shoulder. So I always list it as a con. Some people don't like that double stack 150 on their shoulder. It may be so high because they bought either Pond Gladiator or True ID or the True Attack or something like that that has a bulkier hose to it. So what you're seeing right here on our transverse bed and what the rest of these stretches are with True ID. Now, granted, this True ID has been broken in for the past 3 years. So we make about 85 fires a year. So it sees work, so it's broken in more so than most people's True ID fresh out of the box. So loading the flat load, the very first thing is we've got identifiers all over this load that I can see just walking up from the rig. So the very first identifier is going to be my pigtail. And that pigtail is going to tell me immediately if this hose is loaded correctly. So the reason we load this hose the same way every time is because the couplings will fall in the same exact spot every single time you load it. So it's predictable. So the very first thing I want to do is load my pigtail side on the cab side of the rig. And this goes for the other load as well. It's total opposite from where you see it on this side, because this load with the pigtail out is meant for the nozzle to come towards the pigtail. Now, can it go to the other side? Absolutely. But we load one coming out the officer's side, one coming out the driver's side, just so we have the option to break both of those hose loads from either side of the rig. So if I'm on the driver's side of the rig and I need to take 200, I can break it on that side and take that load. If I'm on the officer's side and I need to break 200, I've got this pigtail available to me as well, or we can add them both together from either side of the truck. So very first identifier is your pigtail is the 200-foot mark of that hose line. It is also the first of 4 short folds that are even with the transverse bed. So as we load it, we're going to make 4 short folds even with the transverse bed, which puts our 150-foot coupling in the same exact spot every single time. So there's our third short fold coming at me. And this is our 150-foot mark. This coupling will always fall cab side with the first identifying loop. And there you go. Cab side, 150-foot coupling. And this is going to start my first identifying pull loops. Very first set of dog ears is what we call them. They're identifiers. This is the 150-foot mark. So everything above these 2 dog ears is 150 foot of hose. Every time we shoulder this load, we shoulder it 150 foot at a time. So here's our first set of dog ears. The very bottom of the second set of short folds away from the cab is going to be your 100-foot coupling. And there we go. There's your 100-foot coupling. Always going to be that second set of short folds. So if I pull up to this, or if I walk up to this transverse bed and I only want 100 foot of hose, I go to the side where the nozzle and the pigtail is, and I break that coupling right there at that second set of short folds, take everything above it. So very easily identifier there, which leads us to our 50-foot coupling coming up. We've got 4 short folds, just like we did on the underside of those 2 loops. There's our third fold. Here's our fourth, which leads us to our 50-foot coupling. I've got my first set of dog ears. The 50-foot coupling will always be cab side opposite of the nozzle. Notice I've got some colored tape on my 50-foot coupling. So immediately when I set the bundle down, I automatically know which coupling is the 50-foot. And it's always going to be behind the nozzle on the cab side. There's our 50-foot coupling. Going to the cab side opposite the nozzle. This leads us to our last identifying feature here, which are these 2 dog ears here. If I pull up and I only need 50 foot of hose, I take the top 2 dog ears and run with it. Everything above those top 2 dog ears is 50 foot of hose. And we're going to finish out with short folds to the nozzle. Very simple to screw up. Every single one of these loads is going to be the exact same if they're loaded the same way every single time. Everything on this hose load is predictable and leads us to the nozzle. So deploying the flat load. I've got 5 different deployment models that we're going to go through here. And I talk you through them in the videos, so I'm going to let myself explain them in the video. So basically what I want to do is I want to put those short folds about waist high. I'm going to bury my shoulder in it, take a step back and turn. That mustache is kicking, son. The rest of the 50-foot section that's in the bed, and I'm going to stretch to the drop. So basically we would use this for any kind of obstacles that we would have, a longer stretch than 66 feet that the triple wouldn't work for, or if we're going upstairs like we're going right now. There we go. So I'm going to stop this video right here. So notice I pulled those dog ears down to about just below my waist. And the reason I did this is because you don't want to overcommit with this line. So depending on which line this is, how high your blood pressure is when you're pulling this line, the last thing you want to do specifically with a little bit less quality hose, if you're running with this, is to overcommit. So what I want to do is I want to pull almost halfway out of the bed, so I'm not overcommitting and having to rush through the shouldering of this operation. So I set it up about a little bit more than a quarter, almost halfway, so the load will sit there and I'm not in a rush in order to set up. I'm going to step up, bury my shoulder in it, take a step back and turn at the same time, and I'm going to reach back and clear my bed. So notice right there by my hand, this is the 150-foot mark for that hose. So as this hose is leaving my shoulder, I automatically know how much hose I have leaving and how much I have left, because all of these identifying features are always in the same spot. Thank you, my man. Oh, man. Here we go. All right. So I got my slack in my hand. Everything comes with me. As soon as I feel it get tight, drop the slack. And now we're field goal. It's just allowing the hose to drop cleanly off my shoulder. Every step I take, that's my 100-foot right there. Every step I take, the hose gets lighter. Everything's coming with me. If I've got any obstacles I'm going through, obviously stairwells, it's paying directly off my shoulder. I'm going to drop with a purpose, drop and drag, find things that look familiar. Nozzle, coupling, shake sheets to the drop. Got a little bit short. But with these apartments, 50 foot will get me everywhere I need to go. Clean up my last kink, call for water. Boom. So as it says, we're going to choose this particular method for any setback longer than 66 feet that's not a straight stretch or contains obstacles or stairs. So I really wouldn't want to put that hose on the ground for this particular stretch. I had 0 obstacles on the way, but I had to traverse a set of stairs in order to do that. So the best case scenario for us in this particular deployment is everything on the shoulder as much as possible. Everything flakes off the top. I don't have to worry about dragging all that up the stairwell with me. Everything's coming with me. Obviously, as it says, the load's inverted at the 150-foot mark and only leaving the last 50 foot to be drugged. Now, granted, I can shoulder everything I can, which is usually about 180 foot of hose. I personally just like 150 because it stays in a nice little stack on my shoulder, and I'm not real worried about having the first 50 foot on the ground. And then, as it says, the rest of the 150 pays off the shoulder. The take and break is essentially a bulk bed operation. We call it the take and break. It's essentially a dead load that happens to be pre-connected at 200 feet. So say, for instance, we're going to this truck right here, and all I need is 50-foot working length, and I need probably 50-foot travel. So I'm going to take the top 2 loops in my nozzle, which is my 50-foot, and then it's going to have probably 50-foot of travel. Cruise right here is going to break it, throw it in the side of the car. All right, so I've determined I need 50-foot travel. I've determined I need 50-foot working length. So the travel is going to pay out from the bed. I just need to keep what I need with me. So if I know I only need 50-foot working length and I've only got 50 foot to travel, I'm just taking top 2 loops. I take the nozzle, top 2 loops, shoulder those, head to the drop. As soon as I feel that coupling come out of the bed, or I look back and I see that coupling hit the ground, then I can start paying out my 50 foot. And notice which hand my coupling is all the time. This is nozzle side for this hose load. Grab the nozzle, grab the top 2 loops, and off we go. Throw the loop on the right, which is my coupling. And my man's going to disconnect and throw it inside the rig. If you only need 100 feet, just take 100 feet. If I don't need 200 feet, there's no reason to put 200 feet on the ground. I would recommend that everybody pre-connects reducers on both sides of the rig. It's a really easy thing to do, but it's something that's easily forgotten if you don't do this type of operation all the time. So now, if you didn't have that reducer, obviously you have to run back over to the EO compartment and then find the reducer that's in the pile of everything that's in the EO compartment. I don't know about y'all, but the EO compartment on my personal rig is the most crowded, cluttered compartment on the damn rig. It's got more shit in it than anything else. So pre-connect these reducers on the side of the rig, just save yourself a step. As it says, chosen if the stretch is only 50 to 100 feet of hose, vehicle fire, trash fires, dumpster fires, stuff like that. If you don't have a bumper line, which we don't on this rig, the flat load's a static bed that happens to be pre-connected at 200 feet. Estimate what you need, take it, and then break it. If you need 50 foot, just take the nozzle. If I need 100 foot, take the dog ears and that section of the first short sections there that we talked about earlier. Here's your triple option, my man. So I can pull the flat load as a triple. It just takes a little bit of difficulty to pan it out, but I would rather have the option along with all the other options here. So if I'm looking at a straight stretch, 66 feet, no obstacles, triple all day. All right, so triple pull. So essentially for any straight pull, 66 feet, no obstacles, just like any other triple load would do. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the nozzle and the bottom right loop. Everything's going to hit the deck right here. So if you've got mailboxes, obstacles right here, wouldn't be the best pull. That's why we have options. So for this one, it's a straight stretch, no obstacles. So I'm gonna grab the nozzle, bottom loop, stretch it. All right, so we talked about earlier that bottom loop right here happens to be at the 66-foot mark. So this is a triple load. I've just got to pull it out and make it deploy as a triple. So like I said, if I'm looking at straight stretch, 66 feet, no obstacles, triple all day. Everything hits the deck. And then boom, there's your triple. So pro tip for you guys that are running the triple, I would not go back for this coupling. If I were you, just walk halfway. There's no reason to walk 50 feet when you can only walk 25. Isolate my nozzle, find my working coupling, walk to 25 feet and pull it to me. End up with the nozzle and coupling, flip my supply off my attack, and we're ready for water. Like it says, chosen for a straight stretch, 66 feet, no obstacles, triple all day. Flat loads a static bed, happens to be pre-connected to 200 feet. Split pull. This is one of the 2 assisted pulls that we're going to talk about. So essentially for this one, I need all 200 feet, but I don't have the room. It's a split pull. So for instance, we've got a straight shot, no obstacles. He needs all 200, but we don't have the room to stretch out the triple, or he doesn't want to invert because he doesn't want to burn a bunch of hose. So he needs all 200 for the actual extinguishment, but he doesn't have enough room to stretch all 200. So this is the only assisted stretch besides the pre-connected I'll show you here in a minute. But what he's going to do is he's going to grab the top loops in the nozzle. Me as playing the driver, I'm going to grab the bottom loops, and I've got a couple choices. I can either go opposite direction of where he's going, I can go the same direction than where he's going, or I can go straight to the drop. So for this one, I'm going to go the opposite direction, but wherever you go, you need to bring him the hose that you actually clear from the bed, because he needs the full 200 or else he would have used the take and break. So I'll see how it looks. Leaving at the same time, and crew's going to the drop. Be good for an alleyway or a very short stretch. He's got his coupling and his nozzle in his hand. I'm bringing everything back to him. Making sure I don't put my supply over his attack. He's ready for water. Last one. This is the quick connect I was talking about earlier. This is the method that we would use to add both of our 200s to make a 400. This is why it's very beneficial to have a pigtail off both sides of the rig. That's why we load the nozzle facing one side and the other, even though it is a bi-directional load. The reason we do that is to put this pigtail available on each side of the rig. So we're not limited to add both these together on just one side of the rig. We can do it from both. All right, last one is the quick connect. So say for instance, we've got RV fire, small fire, car fire, something that's out of reach of the pre-connect. Emphasis on small fire. So I teach this one hesitantly to a lot of departments that we go to, and I always teach it with a preface. So if I'm 350 feet away from the building or away from what's on fire, 350 feet's a long way, Jack. So if I'm unsure of what the fire load is or what it could potentially be or what is actually burning at the location, if I'm unsure and I don't know, we're leading out with 2.5. If I know I'm looking at a tractor or a small RV or a vehicle fire or a burn pile or a dumpster, 1 3/4 all day. But if there's an unknown and I have to travel 350 feet to get there, we're leading out with 2.5. And I equate it to going hunting. So hopefully I got some hunters in the group. If I'm going bird hunting in the same woods that there is also happens to be bear, I'm not just bringing the bird gun. I'm bringing the bear gun as well, Jack. So in this situation, if I don't know what's on fire, we're leading out with the leader line with 2.5 and a nozzle and a bundle. And when I get there, if I only have 1 3/4 fire, more power to us. But if I get there and I've got a large amount of fire that I need to blitz, it saves me from having to walk 350 feet back just to get another line, or trying to not let ego into it and making myself put out this large amount of fire with 1 3/4 inches because I don't want to go back. So lead out with the big guns if you're unsure. So it's not big enough for 2.5, and we can handle it with the 1 3/4, but it's farther than 200 feet, which is our pre-connect. So 300, 350, something like that. One thing we can do is we can add both these flat loads together. It's a double invert. So my man Cruz is going to invert the first one. I'm going to connect my nozzle section to his pigtail, and I'm going to invert as well, and we're going to run off we go. So the benefit of this is that everything but the last 50 feet is on our shoulder. So the traditional Minuteman's always got 100 foot on the ground, and you're always dragging. So the benefit of the invert is everything's on the shoulder, no snag, no drag. We've got to go through any type of obstacles like trees or cars or in through ditches or anything like that. Everything's paying off the shoulder up here. So let's check it out. All right, so my man's walking up. He's going to invert his first. Notice I immediately grab the nozzle off the second line. So I'm taking my nozzle off, and I'm going to disconnect his pigtail and add my nozzle section to his pigtail after he gets inverted. Step back and turn and get out of the way. So now I'm going to disconnect. I'm going to stop him so he doesn't pull the rest of what he has there out of the bed. And I'm going to disconnect his pigtail and connect my nozzle section to the bottom of his 200 foot. And now we have a 400 foot line. So if you don't have a bolt bed option for 400 feet, this will be a great option. Now, same thing. I'm going to invert just like he did. Bury my shoulder, step back and turn. And I reach back and grab what's left in the bed to clear my slack. So the only thing on the ground is the 50 foot from me to the truck and the 50 foot from him to me. Everything else is on the shoulder. That's probably loud on y'all's end. And just like before, everything pays off the top of the shoulder. Constantly look back to make sure you're not going to snag on anything. Still looking good. Now, right here, I don't want him to feel tension early and start dumping loops off his shoulder because it's real easy to do. So I'm going to work my bottom here and make sure he doesn't feel tension until he has to. And as soon as he feels tension, he's going to start tossing loops. There we go. Loops coming off the shoulder, and he's going straight to the drop just like you would. We're running out of time here, so I'm going to speed up a little bit. I got a little bit more stuff to go through here with. So just like before, he's going to drop and drag, drop with a purpose. If y'all have any questions on that flat load, I used to be able to be connected with you on Facebook, but we'll talk about why that didn't happen anymore in the very end of this thing. But if y'all want copies of those videos, just shoot me an email. My email is at the very end of this presentation. So alternative stretches. Not going to hit these too hard. I would rather you hear this from guys that stretch in these multifamilies all day, every day. So this is from my homie Anthony Roette's presentation that he does on estimating the stretch and doing vertical stretches. So just know that there are other options other than just stretching up the stairs. So well hole option. This is real big on the East Coast and departments with multifamilies. So two drastically different well holes here. I've got a narrow well hole on the left. I've got a wide well hole on the right. So narrow well hole and a wide well hole going to stretch the same way. You just need to measure it first. So good rule of thumb is if I can fit a fist of a gloved hand, it'll fit 1 3/4. If I can fit 2 fists gloved hand, it'll fit the 2.5. A lot of people are different about that method. I like some cushion. That gives me cushion with the line charged. Now, there's some departments out there that teach the fist will fit 2.5. That's just a little tight for me. I want 2 fists or else I'm stretching up the stairs, me personally. Coupling drop is a great option for a lot of departments, specifically off bundles. So if you're taking a bundle to a balcony on a garden style or up into an internal stairwell on an apartment building or something, a coupling drop will save you from having to stretch up the stairwell. If I've got access, like I said, to a balcony or a window, I can take the bundle with me. And the biggest benefit over the hook stretch or the rope stretch that we're going to talk about next is that I have my working link with me already. I've already got the bundle. I can lay it out how I want, and all I have to toss out is what I need to make the connection. I've got all my slack at the drop with me, and I don't have to pull it into the window and then create that slack. Specifically in low vis or zero vis environments in an internal stairwell, the coupling drop is way better because I don't have to worry about trying to fish all that hose in a smoky environment or a zero visibility environment and then hoping for the best on how it lays out. If I've got enough experience with the bundle, I know how to set the bundle down and where all my identifying features are, and I don't need to see to do that. So I've got different methods that you can try and get better with your bundle essentially in those environments. But if I've got to pull that nozzle up through the window with a rope or a hook, now I'm in a position to where I've got to set all that slack up without being able to see. So coupling drop is the best option for me in my personal opinion, versus the rope or the hose stretch or the hook stretch. Rope stretch is from my man Anthony in Mobile, Alabama. So essentially, just like anything else, avoiding the stairwell, we're going vertical straight off the roof. I'm going to get to my location. This is what he keeps on his rig. He's got a 75-foot of rope inside this milk jug. He gets to the point to where he's ready to get the nozzle. He just tosses the milk jug out, holds on to the end of it. They tie it off, pull up what you need there. And like I said, the disadvantage of this, other than the coupling drop, is I now have to pull all that in or over the edge and then set up before it's charged. I would also recommend tying this off, specifically if you're in an upper level floor, because as soon as you put water in it, it's coming back out the way you pulled it in. So I would definitely recommend tying it off. Get yourself a little bit more hose than what you're going to need if you have the room to stretch it, and then tie off what you don't need. Lastly, the hook stretch here. Hook stretch is a very good option for balconies. I wouldn't want to do it for more than 3 or 4 balconies, me personally, but very easy to do. As soon as you get to the portion where you, or the point where you're ready for hose, you can avoid all of the stretching through the stairwells or through a courtyard. If you've got a courtyard on the other side and balconies on one side where the rig is, very easy option. Lower down a 10-foot or a 6-foot hook, hook the bail, and then you can just pass it up the balconies as you go. Disadvantage with this, just like the rope stretch, is I'm in a position to where I have to pull what I need over a rail or under a rail, depending on how it's designed. And then I have to flake out my slack. It's just another step that I can avoid by taking the bundle with me and tossing the coupling off to be connected by whoever's downstairs. So like I said, I wouldn't want to do this for more than about 4 stories or so. Anything over that, I would use a rope, because you're essentially passing a hook up above 4 stories or so. So I wouldn't do it for more than 4. So with the alternative stretches on the residential structures, you can get 5 floors with 1 length of hose on a residential and 4 floors with 1 length of hose on a commercial. Just depending on your building construction is whether or not that's going to be the same. Absolutely, it does, my man. Requires a lot of manpower for sure, because I need a guy on every single one of those balconies. Coupling drop is way better. I agree, my man. Last one on the alternative stretches is lines over ladders. So lines over ladders is something you're going to need to train on. It's something that's not very beneficial for all situations, but it can be make or break depending on where you're at and where you're going. It's a very easy way to get vertical. So I want you to notice some things about this picture here. So number 1, notice where the line is positioned on this fireman before he gets on this ladder. He's got the line in front of him traversing this ladder, and that's what I would recommend as well. And the reason for that is if you catch a coupling on the way up and the line comes over your shoulder and you've got nozzle on front, you catch that coupling and it pulls you away from the ladder. If we run it up the front of our body with nozzle on back or loops on the back, if I catch a coupling, it pulls me into the ladder, which is definitely a benefit there. It's what I would recommend. And notice he also has a couple bites of hose set up for himself. So when he enters that window, he doesn't have to pull as much into the window there. So something you need to train on, something that you need to communicate with your guys as an option. It's a very easy option, specifically if the ladder's already in place already. So things to remember here is that if we're using this ladder to get this line in the window, you need to tie it off to something. And I would really recommend, do not tie off to this ladder. So we may use it to traverse into the window, but if you tie off a hose line to this ladder, it cannot be used for anything else on the fire ground, specifically because you tied off to it. So anchor your lines, but do not anchor it to this portable ladder. That would be my piece of advice here. All right, here's the most important slides of the day, the silver bullet. I'm going to teach you how to do all this in 3 slides. put in work. Fail first, then fix it, then repeat. You've got to allow your guys the ability to make mistakes on the drill ground. The drill ground is where we want these guys to make mistakes. Every single one of these guys that you're going to see in these videos have perfected the stretch over many hours and evolutions of going through these stretches. But this is where we want them to screw up. This is a vacant structure we had. And my piece of advice to you would be watch it play out. A lot of guys would have stopped this guy when he started having trouble. This is my man right here, Cruz, that y'all saw stretching at the very beginning of this thing. He was about 2 months in here. So this is about to be a shit show. But you've got to let these guys make these mistakes. Don't stop them when they start having trouble like this, or they won't learn how to fix it, or they won't have that mental Rolodex in their head to know that what I did last time caused this. It's cause and effect. So allow them to make these mistakes so they don't make these mistakes in the future, and it's burned inside their head. So this is Dieter right here on the right. This was the guy in the very first picture in this presentation. So notice I'm not helping him. I could have helped him, but I want him to learn what he did wrong here. So the problem with what he did is he took the bundle to the drop and then started stretching all different directions and ended up with a spaghetti bowl here. And now we're about to put water in it. And my battalion chief comes up and tries to help him. I tell him not to. What a shit show. Gotta let these guys make these mistakes, man, or they'll never learn. And this is where I want them to make these mistakes. I told him I wouldn't fix that. This is my man Dieter here. He's about 2 months in here at this point. All of these guys have multiple hours of stretching lines. We would stretch lines for about, I'd say 4 to 6 hours a day and just put them in situations where they're going to screw up. What a horrible flip he has there. But you got to let it happen. It's all right. He didn't clear his bed. Now he's shucking hose off a little early. I do not see a pigtail here. And what is he going to do? He's going to take the bundle directly to the drop. So we've already talked about what he needed to do, but he just didn't listen. So he's going to take the bundle to the drop, and now he's not perpendicular to the opening. He's parallel, and then bam. Let's see. This looks like a good spot. We'll just shuck it off right here. Now, well, shit. And now he's in a position with a spaghetti bowl. So I've got some identifying features here. I've got a nozzle and I got that coupling, but he's got 100 foot of hose that he's got to find somewhere to put that he could have flaked on the way in. And I could have stopped him right here, but I chose not to. You got to let these guys fix these problems. He's pissed. He hates his job right now. Muscle it out, bud. You did it to yourself. Got my working coupling here, and gonna unlace all this. Oh man, that looks good. No. Oh man. All this could have been prevented, buddy. But this is exactly where I want him to do this. So he does not do it on the fire ground. Nah, I'm ready for what? Nah, shit, I ain't ready for water. Oh, he hates his job right now. His driver helped him out a little bit. I wouldn't have done that. What a shit show. All right, let's see how it plays out. Oh, man, we got a nice little bow tie back there. Got to let these guys make these mistakes, man. He's got to learn how to fix it. Got to learn how to prevent it from happening altogether. Nobody's going to help you, dog. That's all you. All right, now you ready? Are you ready? Are you sure you're ready? Oh man, he hates his job. Now we're ready. All right. This is a good one right here. He almost takes his driver's head off right here. So we just had that incident. And this is the second stretch right after that. So let's see if we learned anything. This is a different guy. A little bit speedier. Watch that driver's head. Whoop. Oh man. Did we learn anything? No. Same plan. Oh man. Just gotta let it happen, folks. Are you sure you're ready? I don't think you're ready. Not ready at all. Well, shit. All right, it's the last one. So that's my man Dieter. He had a bad habit of walking backwards. It was like a month and a half in. Horrible flip. He has a bad habit of walking backwards. He only knows one speed, which is haul ass. Just dumps it down. So I started giving him stretches with obstacles in the way. So either A, I was going to have a montage of this dude eating shit, or B, he was going to stop walking backwards. So we got both out of the deal. So like I said, you got to let these guys make these mistakes, man. And each one of these guys in these videos have perfected the stretch and become jam up firemen on the fire ground. And actually, some of them have been promoted to drivers by now. But you got to let these guys make these mistakes, man. And I always see in presentations all around the country, they got nothing but perfect stretches in their videos. You've got to be able to show people that you want them to make these mistakes. The camera is the best training tool that I have ever invested in. So film every stretch, dissect them with your guys afterwards so they know. I can tell you not to do something and that it would be a good idea to do something else. But if you live it, if you practice it and it goes horribly wrong, that will instill that memory inside your head and you will remember that next time you're in that situation. Film everything. And if all else fails, you'll have a montage of some pretty good stuff that you can get. And I agree, Cameron, lots of value on these videos. And like I said, every single one of these guys has every one of those memories burned into their brain. And not only that, they got to see it twice. They got to live it. And then we watched it later to dissect it. And I told them what happened and why. The most important thing that you need to explain to these guys when you're teaching them to stretch is why things occurred. Because if you explain the why well enough, the why will lead them to the how. It's cause and effect. So you can't just tell them, don't do this or don't do that, or I've done this and it didn't go well. Just see how it plays out. Put them in situations that's going to make them think critically. And we want these guys to be independent operators. I want them to know that why they're doing what they're doing. And then lastly, put in work and let them fail. Like I said, pre-plan and estimate them. Put hose on the ground at least one time a shift if you've got nothing else. A lot of guys work in busy companies. A lot of guys working in areas to where they may not be able to put hose on the ground every day. But if you're not, you've got no excuses. So this is coming back from a run. We were talking about earlier that day on what he would do is if he encountered a gate with a lock on it and he's got 150 foot of hose on his shoulder. And I was asking him what his plan was, and he didn't have a plan. So I found us a spot. So this is in my first due during the week. Everybody's at work, man. We got free reign to train, son. So film the stretches, empower him to figure this things out. So right there, made his plan, executed it. And this is where I was most proud of him. He could have taken the easy way out right here. He had a staircase right here he could have taken. Would have brought him right across that deck, would have been right there, easy, would have had less hose in order to do so, but he didn't. I taught this man to think. And he knew that he wanted to be perpendicular to the opening, and I wanted just enough hose that I needed. Also knew coming in, this door was an outward opening door. Grab things that look familiar, nozzle and coupling, straight to the drop. Knows it's an outward opening door because we saw it coming in, chose the direct path. Got to make independent operators out of these guys, because at 3 o'clock in the morning, they are making the decisions. No matter how much you want to build into your officers that they're in charge and they're going to call the plays, this man has to think. And I want him to be an independent operator to make these decisions. And the only way we're going to be able to get these guys to do that is put them in these situations to make those decisions before it's game time. That's all I have for you, folks. So you can reach me at various places. Used to be able to reach me a lot better. My info is right here. You can reach me through my email. That's best case scenario right now. I was unjustly removed from Facebook not too long ago with my homies from the Oath Keepers organization. You can reach out to me and I can tell you more about that, but that's not why I'm here today. A couple places that I would recommend that you go to check out some of this information. Number one, ECR. Engine Company Resurrection is a group that I started about almost 3 years ago now that has a tremendous amount of information on it engine related. The file section goes deep. The conversations that are had there are moderated and kept positive, and there is tons of information there on that particular group page. If you're not a member, I would recommend doing so. I teach for the Oath Keepers Association, or the Oath Keepers Engine Cadre. We've got a conference coming up at the end of this month. If you have not been able to make it out to Oath Keepers in Ohio, I would really strongly recommend you do so. It's a 2-day conference, 3-day, 1-day lecture, 1-day engine, 1-day truck, and then you flip. So you're either going to do truck the first day and engine the second, or engine the first, second. And it is made up of a bunch of meat eaters, man. It is the most aggressive conference that I have ever attended first, and now am thankful and honored enough to teach with these guys from now on. But you better get in fast if you're going to get in. So Oath Keepers sold out in less than 5 minutes this year when they opened up registration. So I know guys that had 3 or 4 computers that were open, refreshing, and still couldn't get in. So they go fast. I also teach with FD Tactics Training. We do have a Facebook page that I'm not on for obvious reasons, because I was removed from Facebook completely. And then I have my apparel company, which is Smoothbore Cartel. Check it out. Got some nice swag there. But that's the end of the presentation, guys. I have all the time in the world to spend with you and answer some questions if you have any. So feel free to ask them. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. The stretch videos. I can't see your name there. Guy asked if the stretch videos are available. If you're talking about the flat load videos, I can send them through Google Drive. Feel free to send me a Gmail address and I can share those videos with you for the flat load ones. You're very welcome, Cameron. I hope I didn't hurt your feelings with the triple load, man. The truth hurts, brother. My homie usually tells me the truth will piss you off right before it sets you free, my friend. Matt Brown, he asked, do I feel all the engine hose loads should be set up the same? I actually run a Minuteman off the backside, and I'm going to unmute you, Matt. Hopefully I can be able to unmute you. If you've got a question, I'm going to unmute you so we can have a conversation so it's not one-sided. So let me find Matt Brown. Oh, I don't think I can unmute you. I can't unmute you, Matt. That's how it's set up. But I would say that if you don't have all your hose loads the same, then you need to have a plan to pull each one. I actually run Minutemans off the rear of my rig as well as a bulk load. So having those options there definitely will be a benefit, specifically if you have all different types of setbacks in your district. So you can't always put all your eggs in one basket. But I actually have flat load and Minuteman 2.5 on the rig. I know that admin usually has some trouble with having different hose loads on the rig and having to pull them different ways, but that can all be alleviated with a good training plan. And I hope I answered your question because I can't unmute you. AE Health says, I like your point regarding the perpendicular setup for supply over attack. Generally, are you setting up about 25 feet or so from the drop off the building? That all depends on how much hose I have on my shoulder. So the good thing about our transverse bed is I can just look down at what I have on my shoulder, and with those identifying features, I can actually tell how much hose I have on my shoulder. So I'm just going to split that number in half if I'm stretching forward. If I end up with more than, half of what I'm looking at to the drop, then I will drop and drag and then stretch, do the back stretch. But best case scenario is as I'm rounding the corner to that drop location, we can look down and see how much hose we have, and I can estimate the distance between that and my drop point, and then we can drop with a half distance. So that would be best case scenario. But worst case scenario, I have to do a back stretch. And I say worst case because it just causes me more time. I've got to go back and forth when I could just have one fluid motion to the drop point. Excellent. What's the farthest I would stretch with 1 3/4? I stretch 400 feet with 1 3/4, and that's the farthest I'll go with it. So I run True ID with 7/8 and 15/16, and knowing your setup and knowing what it is will allow you to answer that question for yourself. The reason I don't go past 400 feet is because the PDP is too high. So best case scenario, I'll fill it out with 2.5 to bring the friction loss down, and then extend off of that with a bundle. But if I want quick water is always going to be faster if it's pre-connected or if it's coming from a bulk bed versus pulling two different lines and then add them together. So I personally wouldn't go 400 feet, past 400 feet with my 1 3/4. So my PDP for my 1 3/4, 400 feet is 194 with a 7/8 or 224, like 224 with 15/16. So that puts me in the working limit for that hose being tested at 250 would be the most I would put in it, which is going to be my rev limiter on my rig anyway. But for a 400-foot stretch for 7/8 water, I'm 194 on the pump panel, which is definitely doable. But that's with my hose and my setup. So you may have some oversized hose that allows you to have the friction loss drop a little bit, and you may want to go a little farther with that. I personally wouldn't go farther than 400 feet. 350 feet would be the minimum working length of 50, and 350 feet's a long way, Jack. How do these loads change, if at all, in a speed lay lower on the engine? So we travel all over the country, and we have a lot of departments that have pucks or the speed lay trays that you're talking about. And the biggest issue that I've had with these is that the connection point is on top instead of being on the bottom. And one thing that we've done to alleviate that is just make sure that pigtail comes to the side of that load. So as you're loading it in the speed tray, that pigtail, as it's going towards that connection, goes up the side and then under the entire load that's loaded on top of it. So I can still do everything I can do with it on the top cross layer transverse bed. It just adds a different level of difficulty. And I would say the hardest part of that would be the invert and shoulder. And you may have to end up taking a knee to do that, depending on how low it is. What's the furthest that I would stretch for 2.5? It just depends on what I'm flowing out of it. So with my 2.5 that I have, 300 GPM is 15 PSI per 100 for the friction loss. So it just depends on where that friction loss would meet my rev limiter there. But on that same token, I've only got 600 feet of 2.5 on my rig, plus a 50-foot donut roll in my compartment. So I would say my answer would be 650 because that's all I have the ability to do. But if I needed to go farther than that, it would just depend on what I was flowing out of it. So if I'm flowing 7/8 water out of it, my friction loss is 2 per stick of hose. So I would say we would just have to calculate and see how much 1 3/4 I'm putting on it and how far I'm able to go with that flow range with the operating pressure of your nozzle. My operating pressure is 50 because we're all smooth bore. What are your thoughts over some of the thicker hose such as Key True ID or Combat Ready? I know the best reason is for smoothbore setups. My thoughts on it, honestly, is that True ID hose has been the best hose that I've ever flowed with ever at 50 psi. You sacrifice the ability to pack it well because it has rigidity in the last 3 feet and throughout that allows you to have it flows better than any hose that I've ever flowed on the market, in my personal opinion. I can hit all my 90s directly over, left, right, above, and behind me without any kinks. I'm not worried about the back pressure being too low for it to kink behind me. Obviously, all hose will kink. Anybody that tells you that this particular hose is unkinkable is lying to you. But with that rigidity that's built in with the True ID, it has a very high kink resistance. But the problem with that for a lot of people, specifically guys that run triples, is that it doesn't pack well. And if it doesn't pack well, that usually is a drawback to people using that type of hose, which, I mean, it has to be considered, when you're talking about loading hose on the rig. But my personal opinion is if you're buying your hose for the way it sits on the rig, you're doing it wrong. You can adapt that hose load to do what you need to do if you want the flow capabilities. Now, I will tell you that the Key Sniper is a great alternative to that. So if you're in a Minuteman that's a single stack or a flat load that's a single stack, I would definitely recommend going with Sniper if you're in that 160 to 175 to 85 range on your target flow. It's going to sit a lot better, but you sacrifice the rigidity in the last 3 feet of that line. So you're going to have some kink issues there that you wouldn't have with True ID. And what I've found with Sniper is that it kinks when I flow to the dominant side. So I'm right-handed and I can flow across my body in a 90-degree angle to the left with no kink whatsoever. As soon as I take it to the dominant side on my right side, I form a kink. So I have to come around with that line in order to do that without a kink. So you can't get something for nothing. So if you want a hose that's fully rigid at 50, it's going to sacrifice some packability. If you want a hose that packs well, it's going to sacrifice some end result on the flow. And hopefully I answered your question with all of that. And I agree, Kenny, True ID for the win. I am not running string shapers on the smooth bores on hand lines. I would not recommend running string shapers on hand lines just for the simple fact that the beauty of the smooth bore is that it has a full open waterway. If you're in a position to where your bail or your waterway is causing issues with stream pattern, all that can be cleaned up with some spec and layout, but I would not recommend running stream shapers on hand lines. Now, once you start moving into ram flows and deck gun flows, the stream shaper is necessary. It has to be there because when you get up to that velocity and flow, you're going to have the stream shaper. So rams, I would recommend one tip, not a stack, because the more you have a stack is more possibilities for it to be chattering the stream and pretty much starts the breakover point a little earlier. But if you have the ability to just one long tip on the ram, and then with the stack tips on the deck gun, it's kind of hard to avoid that. But no, to answer your question, Matt, I would not run stream shapers on smooth bore hand lines. See if I missed any of these questions. The best hose for the 1 3/16 tip. That's a tough one, man. It all depends on where you're going to be stretching to and what flow you're going to be utilizing out of that. So if you're going top end on 1 3/16 for the 328, I would not recommend going with anything less than 2.5. So the 225 is a great option. It just ends up being pretty reactive at that high flow rate that you have there. So the 225, the benefit of that is you're losing water weight. It's more mobile. It packs a little bit crazy depending on if you're using it, how you're loading it. But I would not recommend the 225 for Key over the 265 and maybe for the 300 GPM flow, but it starts to get a little squirrely once you get above that 265. So if you're running the 225, I would recommend hovering around that 265 GPM flow. You're going to have better results with it. It gets a little crazy once you get up to that flow there. It's just not designed for that. Its target flow is within that 265 range, 250 to 265. I do like true 2.5, but pro tip here, the true 2.5 is really Big 10. So they may not like me telling you that, but the true ID 1 3/4 inch that you have, the rigidity, you're not going to have the same type of hose in the 2.5. It's still rigid. It's just Big 10 construction in an actual 2.5-inch inside diameter. 288 would be definitely a better option. The drawback with that is the water weight, but I've had no issues out of the true 2.5 at that 328 flow. It flows like a dream. The only thing different is you got to think about how long you're going to want, or your stretch potential, or envelope of function, as Dennis Laguerre would call it. So really that all comes down to what your potential for going long is, because that higher friction loss in that true 2.5 will limit your envelope of function, as Dennis would say. So if you're doing short setbacks, no more than 300 to 400 feet of 2.5, maybe, then I would go true 2.5. You're going to have greater rigidity, and you're going to have less water weight, which is going to in turn result in better mobility. You're welcome, AE Health. You're very welcome, sir. I'm glad you learned something from it. Please reach out to me if you got any questions. Nozzle reaction. Are you seeing firefighters being able to handle more GPM with smooth bores? Anything you would steer clear of? Nozzle reaction is going to be based on your strength and conditioning and your abilities. So I would prefer to stay about 60 pounds nozzle reaction, me personally, with a short staffed engine, because it doesn't matter how big you are or how much abilities you have. That 59 to 60 pounds nozzle reaction, the 7/8, I can take a guy who's never flowed a nozzle in his life, and in 4 hours have him pushing that to the back wall in flow and move transitions. So the nozzle reaction there is definitely a big winner, in my personal opinion. If you've got a heavier staffed engine, the 15/16 is a great nozzle as well. I just personally prefer the 7/8 just due to its mobility. And yes, I would say that, and really the smoothbore versus fog on the nozzle reaction, the fog actually has less nozzle reaction than the smoothbore, very minimal less, because it encounters obstacles on the way to its exit path. So the smoothbore nozzle is a direct hole, smooth open waterway. So you're getting all of the nozzle reaction there. On a constant gallonage nozzle at 50 PSI, you're going to have 1 to 2 pounds less nozzle reaction, just due to the fact that it's encountering obstructions. It's got to be dispersed inside that nozzle. So we can get on the smooth versus fog debate if you want, but I don't think that's why we're here, but I'd be more than happy to talk about it. But you can get the same flow out of the 5160 with 2 pounds less nozzle reaction with the fog, but comes with some drawbacks. Anything I would steer clear of would be the 1-inch tip. I would steer clear from the 1-inch tip. They call that the Bronx Blaster for a reason. So I would limit 1 3/4 inch lines to the 15/16 nozzle reaction, which is going to be in that 69 pounds range. So for a short staff crew, for one person being able to manage that line without having his backup being right directly on him, I would stay in the 60 to 70 pounds nozzle reaction. That would be my advice. So stay away from the Bronx Blaster unless you got a 4-man crew. We run 3-man engines 95% of the time. We're looking to add smooth bores to our weapon selection. No debate. Okay, yeah, no debate. So I can get you a lot of information to help you with that transition. I will tell you that if you're running high pressure nozzles right now, you most likely have a hose package that's not set up to run low pressure, and that's going to be your biggest hurdle. So another big hurdle with departments that run, TFT 100 PSI automatics, I would be willing to bet that your hose package or your attack package is built to run at 100 PSI. So you could be in like a Mercedes EXO or Eco 10 from Key or Fire Equip 800. I don't know what you're running, But if you're running 100 PSI automatics, most of the time when admin buys equipment, they're going to buy, and it's just like anything else, it's the cheapest bidder. So if they have a hose package that can be supported with 100 PSI nozzle pressure, they're probably not going to buy quality hose. So your biggest hurdle there is going to be finding hose that will support that 50 PSI range for the nozzle pressure without kinking or you having to wear a mouth guard because it's going to slap you in the face every time you open the nozzle. So the biggest win there would be low pressure. So if you can get your nozzles to low pressure, then you can build off the smoothbore option. But I would attack the attack package first. American hose true. So you're running true attack. I would suggest there from that comment, true attack. I've played with the true attack. It's a little reactive and floppy, but I've seen worse. It's not something that's not D-back or Eco 10. So those are going to be drastic or Big 10. And I would say that it's probably going to act like Big 10. So Big 10 inch and 3/4 was meant for 75 PSI nozzles, but you can put a 50 PSI nozzle on it and still not have to take one to the face every time you open it. You're in a better situation where you are now besides Eco 10, but you're already in a low pressure hose, meaning 75 to 50, so that's already a big win for you. Just got rid of the Eco 10. Good call, man. Good call. So I'm actually playing with a new tip that a buddy of mine sent me. It's a 13/16, and I shot some videos yesterday. I was flowing it off of Eco 10 and D-back, which D-back is designed for 75 PSI. Eco 10 obviously designed for 100 PSI. And where most people have the trouble is when they try to put a 50 PSI nozzle on an attack package that is designed for 75 or 100. And then they get upset about it not working well. It's like it's not the hose's fault. That hose was designed for a specific operation that you're trying to make it do something different. You're trying to operate that hose line outside of its window of design, which is usually the biggest issue there. But the 13/16 nozzle that I'm playing with now, I'll post some videos on it later on when I get some editing done. But I'm running that 13/16 at 65. And what that does is it increases the back pressure in that last 3 feet or all the way through, but specifically in that last 3 feet. And it makes that hose a little bit rigid, so where you don't have the rigidity in construction, you have to make up for that in back pressure, which is the same thing as nozzle pressure. So I'm playing with that right now. I was able to flow the Eco 10 at 65 and flow 158 gallons a minute with 67 pounds of nozzle reaction. So when you bring the nozzle pressure up, you have the negative effect of more nozzle reaction. But for departments that don't have the ability to change hose and want to run a lower pressure and a smoothbore option, it would be a good option. So that tip, dialing you in at 175 at 50. So is that tip dialing you in at 175 at 50? No, sir. At 50, it would be, here, I got the specs on it right now. I wouldn't run it at 50 because that defeats the purpose of what I'm trying to do. So when you're trying to, I'm running that at a higher nozzle pressure to make up for the rigidity not being there in that hose line. So at 50, at 13/16 at 50 is 139 gallons a minute. And that is 52 pounds nozzle reaction, but I'm not running it at 50. So what I'm doing is I'm making up for that rigidity there with higher nozzle pressure. So I ran it at 65, which was 158 gallons a minute with 67 pounds nozzle reaction. And I was able to flow it and not have to worry about taking one to the face. So what I did was I filmed it with 50 PSI and took some major chances for the future truth telling of this operation. And then I ran a 7/8 at 50 and almost took a couple to the face. And then I put the 13/16 at 65, and you can see a drastic difference with it, but the 13/16 is not available anywhere. You have to custom make it, so a buddy of mine had them custom made and sent to me. Hopefully all that rambling answered your question, Matt. And if anybody else has got any more questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. Any problems running 15/16 at 40? That really just depends on your attack package. If you're in a combat ready is beautiful at that. But it all comes down to the rigidity of the hose. I could run it on the True ID, no problem. The issue I have with that is the velocity is going to drop. So with the velocity dropping, I lose reach, obviously, and the hose stream starts to break up a little bit earlier than I would like. So I want to stay around that 85 feet per second with that Freeman ratio with the 50 PSI nozzle pressure. So slow, lazy water has a place, and high, fast water has a place as well, but for the 1 3/4 hand line, the 85 feet per second is the gold standard with that. If you only have a 15/16, that would be a good option. If you're wanting to run that 7/8 water with the 7/8 nozzle reaction, it's a good option. It's just if your hose will support it is the big question. So you may end up having more negative return with possible kinks at the end of the nozzle. Just depends on what your attack package is. But I know a lot of guys that under and over pump it. So there's some guys in Houston that over pump it to 60 to get that 202. I think it's 202 GPM because they're big on 200 gallons a minute in Houston. So I'd rather have 160 that I can have one guy, the smallest guy on my crew, push to the back wall than 200 that I have to pin myself against a wall to open. My personal opinion. But yeah, if your attack package will support it, more power to you, man. Anybody else got any more questions? I see you guys dropping off. You got any more questions? I'll sit here with you all night, guys. Kenny, we'll see you in a couple weeks, man. Excellent. Looks like everybody's bailing out. I really appreciate you guys sticking with me. For those of you who are watching in the future, please feel free to reach out to me. My email was in the end of it. You can't reach me on Facebook because we were unjustly removed from Facebook because of the name Oath Keepers. We're fighting the good fight, and I refuse to make a fake profile. So if you feel free to reach out to me on my email if you have any questions. You can reach out to me through the Smoothbore Cartel page as well, or the FT Tactics training page. I'm going to go ahead and close it out. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you hanging out with me. Holler at me if you need something.